everybody, Dan Illman, Mike Beer here at beautiful Monmouth Park. It is Haskell Week, and race number 11 on Haskell Saturday is the Grade 2 United Nations. We're going 1 3/8 miles, 3 turns on the Monmouth Park turf course. Let's take a look at this field. $600,000 is the purse. Mike, this is a wide open race on paper. I think you can make a case for 5 or 6 of these on top. Has the 10 Web Slinger found himself at these longer distances?
That's sort of one of the main questions of the race anyway, Dan. He certainly liked stretching out in his most recent start. This is a tougher race than that one, but Web Slinger's been a good horse right along. I really like this race. There's a lot going on here. I think a lot of different horses can win.
Now we know that a horse like Web Slinger likes to race from the back of the pack. He needs a little bit of help. At times he hasn't gotten it, either from a pace or trip standpoint. He should at least get some pace. Taking a look at the Timeform US pace projector, the 3 Get Smoke and the uncoupled stablemate of Web Slinger. He's got a ton of early speed. He got a little bit of a nice prep last time out, but there are some other horses with some early lick in here. He's got the most quality speed.
It does feel that way, and you feel like maybe the distance is okay too. He did win at 1.5 miles at the end of last year. We'll see that. Listen, you pull the pace projector for a race like this and you see number 8 so high in the field and you feel like there's no way he's not making the lead in here. They don't have him on the lead, and it might be right.
But you never know. High is a horse that at times his job is just go out there and lay him down as fast as he can for as far as he can. We'll see if those tactics work out. Grand Sonata was aggressive last time out for Todd Pletcher in the Monmouth Stakes, going 1.1 miles, and I don't think he needs to be ridden that way.
No.
It says, steadied late. He was beaten at that point when he was pinched in between horses. He did stay on very well. But when you have 8 horses beaten 2 lengths at the wire, I think you have to question the overall quality of the race. I do think Javier can pull a trip from the rail in the pocket.
I agree with that. And it's also fair to just look at the trip Grand Sonata pulled and say, all right, he was part of it. The race eventually fell apart at the end and went to closers, so maybe you want to give him credit for that. My counter argument to that is Tawny Port, who's also back in this field, was also part of that pace. He settled, he landed 3rd in that race. I don't know, man. I'm a Grand Sonata fan. I actually think he's an underrated horse, but he needs the right trip in here, and then I think he needs to up his game just a little bit.
Emmanuel, the number 2, goes out also for Todd Pletcher. This is a horse that's just maddening to decipher from a form standpoint, because there are times that he looks really, really good, and there are times where he looks really bad, as he did last time out when he didn't pick up his feet in the Grade 3 Arlington. Okay, give him the race 2 starts back. He's not beating Master of the Seas with any kind of a trip over any kind of a ground. The race before that in the Canadian turf, it looked like, okay, Emmanuel's going to have a nice year picking off Grade 3 middle distance races. Now they're stretching him all the way out.
He still might have a pretty decent year. He is kind of the most interesting horse in the race, though. Does more distance really work for this horse? I'm not sure that I'm buying it. That being said, I kind of understand what Todd's doing here, because if he can handle a distance of ground, these are the races that you can do really well in if you have enough talent.
Here's the 3 Get Smoking, and as Mike talked about in the pace projector segment, he was able to stretch his speed 1.5 miles at Kentucky Downs, and he did it pretty well at a big price. Cassie brought him back in the Eclipse. He told me earlier today, he said, Dan, as these horses get older, it's so tough to get them back, and he couldn't get any turf races to fill for him, so they ran him in the Grade 2 Eclipse. He finished 4th, but he was very happy with the performance. Those were good horses. He at least showed some speed, and Mark said he gained the fitness he needed.
Off the layoff there, it's probably exactly what they wanted. Surface probably doesn't matter in that regard. So we'll see. He gets back to turf here. This is obviously a surface. The big problem with him is, aside from the Kentucky Downs race, and listen, he ran well there. He got a figure for that race. It was at Kentucky Downs, though, so who knows how it translates. He blew the stretch lead last time off the layoff. The prior 3 or 4 starts before the Kentucky Downs race, he blew stretch leads in all of those races. So I just wonder if he's going to, even if he makes the lead here, can he hold on?
Adamo seeks his first victory since winning this race back in 2022. Chad Brown told me earlier today he thought after that race this horse had the potential, he felt, to be one of the better turf horses in the country. It did not pan out. His most recent start, the Monmouth, was not a very good performance. He was basically very wide turning into the stretch, but he didn't finish much. And Chad says this horse has kind of been a victim of his own success. He wants to drop him down. They just don't run allowance races at 1.5 miles.
Yeah, you're not going to find races like that for him. I think 2 things that are worth pointing out. First of all, he's just not that good. He did win this race 2 years ago. I'm not going to take that away from him. He got a big figure for it. It's also worth noting, though, Dan, when he won that race, the horse that was second was $1 million to win. Over 70 to 1 in that race. He was also still able to run on Lasix that day, which he cannot do anymore. That's his last win. with Lasix on. He hasn't had Lasix since then. He hasn't won a race since then.
Fort Washington and Running B dead heated for the win in this race, the Grade 3 Monmouth. We talked about it. Nice to see Shug win a graded race at 35-1. And it makes me wonder if Fort Washington is just a different horse on this Monmouth turf course. He's now 2 for 2. His ROI's got to be $1,000.
That's a good point. It's not even one that I considered, but I like where you're going with it. I'm a big Fort Washington fan. I don't like him in this race too much. He ran fine last time. He and Running B was also back in here. They sort of made the same run. They were in tandem from the top of the stretch. They got up late and they shared the win.
Both Fort Washington and Running B are going to be stretching out. Now, Running B has run well at slightly longer distances, 1 mile and 3/16. Chad said he feels this horse, as he gets older, is just going to appreciate more distance. And watching the Monmouth, I guess you could understand why. He was sort of hard-ridden on the second turn and then just grinded it out.
Yeah, I mean, but that's true. And both he and Fort Washington, though, had the right trip that day, though, too, because they had an unimpeded stretch run. The horses in front of them did a lot of hard work, and they were tired at the end, and these two horses came and picked them up. Don't want to knock either one of them. They're both going to be prices right back in this race, but I kind of wanted to bet other horses.
A horse that might have more upside than some of the others is up next, and he's a very interesting horse because he's very sharp.
Yeah.
And that's the 7 Data Man, who's already won at 1 mile and 3/16. Now they're going to stretch him out in his 3rd start of the year after 2 very likable wins at middle distances.
Yeah.
Let's watch his race in the Cliffhanger and watch the race in Formulator, because he misses the break, he's far behind a slow pace, and then he runs over some good horses.
It was a pretty good field. I mean, it wasn't the quality of this field that he's going to run in on the UN, but it was a pretty good field. And you're right, he had plenty of excuses that day not to win. And not only did he win, he won really easily with a big finish from the top of the stretch. The more I watch him run, Dan, I know that he's never been this far, the more I feel like he's going to be okay with this distance. He's still a little green. He doesn't bake from the gate well all the time. His lead changes are a little wonky, but this horse can run.
He's got a lot of talent. Graham says he's a little bit kooky. He's a typical tappet. He's a little tough on himself in the morning, which is why he's happy to give him a little bit of time since his last race, but he's really bred to get this distance, and I'm not too worried about the trip. So high, we're a little bit worried about class. I mean, after all, in this race, he finishes 3rd. It's a $40,000 claimer. He had everything up front. He couldn't hold them off. How's he going to hold these off?
Yeah, he's not going to, but he can be a big factor in this race, especially for a horse, like for the other horses that want to be forward in here. Get Smokin', who you feel like could be a dangerous horse in here. Having So High in the field really compromises his chances, I think, Dan, because So High, he's got one way to go. They're not going to rate this horse. He's going to come out of there running and try to make the lead.
He was 5 lengths clear at the half-mile pole of this race last year at a big price before tiring. I would expect similar tactics. Tawny Port is the number 9. He finished 3rd in the Monmouth last time out. He is a horse with very good tactical speed. He'll be placed wherever Flavian Pratt wants him. I'm not worried about distance. This horse won the John's Call at 13. Maybe stretching out will help him.
The distance is fine for this horse. And if you listen, you go back to the Monmouth in his most recent start, and if you want to talk to me about that race and say, listen, maybe Tawny Port was best. He finished 3rd. Maybe he ran the best race that day. I'm not going to disagree with you. I still don't like him, Dan. I'm just not a fan of this horse. I think he can be there at the end, but I'm not betting him.
It was nice to see Webb Slinger get to the winner's circle after one tough beat after another. And he gets himself into his own trouble because he doesn't have a lot of early speed, and then he runs into traffic or gets no pace. But in the Charliewood last time out, the first time they really stretched him out, he did get into the clear in the right time, and he grinded them down. The distance seems to be fine. The pace should be fine. Let's see if he can go in a run.
Yeah, and it's not like there were no good horses in that field last time. I mean, it wasn't a top-class field, but there were some good horses behind him. He won really easily. It was nice to see him get a good trip. It was nice to see him run another really nice race. This horse is good, Dan. He's going to need the right trip in here. I'm very interested to see if he can put wins back-to-back here, because in some ways I feel like there's an argument to be made that he's the best horse in the race.
Michael Maker won this race with Therapist last year, and I think he has a good chance with the 11 starting over. A horse that loves the distance, won the McDermott a last time out. He is a firm turf specialist. They wanted to run him during the Keeneland Spring Meet. Maker scratched him because the turf was off. I know they entered him in the Belmont Gold Cup, and the turf was listed firm that day, but they scratched him, so they're running him off a little bit of a break, but in Maker I trust in these situations. Another horse that can make a late run.
Yeah, and that Belmont Gold Cup was 2 miles too, so even if he ran there, you know, what does it really mean if he ran well or didn't? It feels like this is the right race to run him in, Dan. I can't say that I love that he's missed time since the 2 best races of his life. The last 2 times we saw him, I don't love that we haven't seen him since then, but he's a contender here.
And Farbridge drops out of a couple of Grade 1 stakes races for trainer Christophe Clement. The distance should be fine for him. I thought he ran okay in the Manhattan last time out. He was in between horses. It looked like he was kind of in tight on the second turn a little bit. Then the trip worked out. He was able to split horses. He was trying his best at the end against some pretty good horses. We'll see what sort of trip he can work out, at least at this distance. It gives Jose plenty of time.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I'm kind of not worried about the distance, but he is a horse who has to prove it, and it's not like he's going to be some kind of great price in here. He's also got post 12. Those are the things that bother me more than anything else. I thought he ran well last time. I thought he ran better than it looks 2 starts back in a Grade 1. I like him as a horse, and I think he's good. I think he can win here. I don't think I'd be willing to take a short price.
Top pick time for the United Nations. Mike, where are you going?
I'm going to try Adamo in here, Dan.
Offside.
I know he's got to up his game, but I feel like he can. I think he fits with these horses if he can get the right kind of a trip in here. I have Web Slinger second. I kind of feel like he's the horse to beat in here, and I think if he gets the right trip, he's going to be really hard to hit.
Expecting both of those horses to run well, I just think this is a really good spot for Farbridge, who began his career for Clement like he was going to be something, then did some good things for Todd, and I think his last 2 races are okay enough where a little class relief might go a long way. I'll go with Farbridge. Keep an eye on Data Man and Graham Motion in a wide open edition of the United Nations.